Surprise, everyone. I know that originally I had planned to not do some of the comic books until after I did the books, but between reading Fall of Reach, or at least the first two sections of it, Silent Storm, and Oblivion, I really just sat there and thought to myself, like, wouldn't it just be wise to do Collateral Damage? Purely because it takes place throughout the entirety of these books. Okay, that's not the exact wording, but it does take place within the same timeline as these books. So I thought, hey, I read it just for funsies, just to continue my own little journey within the lore. Why don't we talk about it in a video? So that's what we're going to be doing today. What's up, guys? Halo Repository back today with another video. Today we're going to be talking about Halo Collateral Damage, one of our first comic books that we'll be looking at in the Halo universe. Now, my dog decided to come and be a part of the video, so she will be in the background for however long she decides. But yes, we were talking about Halo Collateral Damage. Now, Collateral Damage came out throughout the summer of 2018. It was split into 3 separate comics just a few months before the release of Halo Silent Storm. And it does, in a way, act as a somewhat of a prequel to Silent Storm. Or it could be seen more of as a primer. I'll get a little bit more into what I mean by that as we make our way through the story and when I start talking about what you need in order to prepare for Halo Silent Storm. So let's just jump right into the book. Okay, so before we jump into this, let's talk about the author and the cover. First, the author is Alex Irvine, who is no stranger to Halo and science fiction comic books as well, doing things such as Marvel, DC, Transformers, and more like that. He's also done a couple of other works in Halo, such as The Rise of Atriox, as well as Tales from Slipspace. So this is definitely not his first rodeo with the Halo books. Now, as far as the art goes, there's actually quite a bit of different artists. The main one, if you actually look at this cover, you can see down there it has the author and the artist, is Dave Crossland. Now, Dave Crossland has also done a number of different things within the comic book universe. He's also done other things such as Tales of Slipspace, specifically the Knight Takes Bishop comic book. But overall, he does well with the art style of Halo. Amongst the other artists, there are Leonard O'Grady, Simon Boland, Sherrod Jackson, and lastly, Zach Hartong. Hopefully I pronounced all those names correctly. If not, sorry. Zach, in fact, is the one who did this front cover. And in fact, a lot of the more like comic book covers for Collateral Damage that got released over that summer of 2018 were all by Zach, and you can see that as you're reading it, it will tell you this specific piece of art was done by Zach. Those other artists were more of different things, such as lettering, shading, all that kind of stuff, coloring, all that kind of stuff. But Dave Crossland was kind of the main, artist of this entire series. And at the very end of this book, you kind of get a little bit more details of how he went about designing the Spartans, some of the vehicles, the Covenant, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we make our way to the end of the book. So let's talk about the actual cover. The cover depicts Blue Team coming down into battle. We get to see their experimental armor that we'll talk about at the beginning of the book. But as you can see, it's very much depicting a Blue Team-esque Halo 5 look into the Spartans. Most of these Spartans have the exact same type of armor that they've been wearing. Chief with the Mark 6, Fred with the Centurion armor, Kelly with the EVA, and Linda with the Argus. Now, that's not the name of these exact pieces of armor. It's just the more relatable ones that I can explain that you see in Halo 5. And of course, with Halo Infinite having their Gen 3 Mark 6 armor, or at least their version of the Mark 6. Mark 6 is typically only worn by the Master Chief, of course. Overall, I do like the look of this cover, but one thing that I will note about this comic book series is there are times when the armor looks really good, and then there's times when it looks a bit wonky to me. I do think that at this specific one, it makes Kelly and Linda look a bit wonky. Chief and Fred look pretty good, and I do like the different shadings of blue and green and brown and whatever color armor Kelly's wearing. Looks like the same almost blue as Fred, but you have a very light blue for the majority of the armor, and then for more of those accents and especially the serial number, it's like a darker shade of that same color to really pop with the armor. I do think for it being an experimental Mark IV armor, it's really cool. And what also I like to see is that on the cover, All four of them are using what I would assume are BR-55 battle rifles, which are the battle rifles of, the early Covenant War era. And it's also kind of unique to think about because remember, this came out in summer of 2018 with the full collection releasing in 2019 in hardcover, which is what this is, which means it's about the same year that Halo Infinite got its first reveal, and about a year before we got our first look at the Discover Hope trailer. So 343 was definitely going back to that original look for Halo that we all have come to see with the full release of Halo Infinite and now the next generation of Halo on Unreal Engine. Okay, story time. So this story takes place about 5 days after the death of SAM-034 on December 1st, 2525. All Spartan 2s are back aboard the UNSC Persian Gate hovering over the planet of Kai-Seti 4, which is the planet in which they got their Mjolnir armor, then took out that Covenant ship, which is where they had to unfortunately leave Sam behind as his armor was exposed to, plasma fire, causing it to be damaged and no longer able to go in space without him basically dying. They're holding a memorial service for Sam, and in this moment, it's kind of Halsey just like pretty much recognizing that for the Spartans, this is their first loss. 48 hours later, the Spartans are in a preparation room getting prepared for their next mission. But Halsey once again is sitting there going, now that you've had time to pretty much, understand that you guys, the Spartans, can die. You will lose your teammates on the battlefield. Honor that feeling of grieving that you have because it's what makes you human, but also be prepared to put it aside because the Spartans need you and you're our only hope for this war. That's obviously very Halsey-like, as she's pretty much just saying, like, yeah, death sucks, let's move forward until certain things in her life happen, and we'll get to those in the future. But just soon after, Commander Yao of the UNSC Persian Gate comes into Spartan Blue Team's prepare room and basically starts to debrief them on their next mission. We learn that, again, we're still relatively early on in the Covenant War. We've learned that the Covenant has pretty much been probing outer colony planets, and they've decided to start attacking one called Alpha Corvi 2. There's already a garrison of UNSC on the planet putting up a relatively good fight. However, there is an expectation, or at least data that tells them that more Covenant will be coming to the planet. A vast, large amount of reinforcements that will easily overrun the UNSC. So the Spartans are being deployed to the planet to essentially act as a buffer. They will take out the Covenant outside the outskirts of the city of Jamshid. Through this mission, though, Blue Team is not allowed to make contact with those UNSC forces. They're still trying to keep the Spartans as under wrap as possible, but it's mostly a way to demonstrate how effectively the Spartans operate, both as a military unit and on their own without any sort of backup. So Halsey and Commander Yao pretty much say, like, hey, no contact with them. You just get in, you take out the reinforcements, and you get out. That's the mission. As Blue Team is getting ready for deployment, the UNSC Persian Gates AI, known as Nora, pretty much starts to prepare them for their brand new armor. Now, this is a little interesting to think because literally just a few days ago, maybe even a week ago at this point, they had just received their Mjolnir armor. All of the Mark IV armor that Spartans wear throughout the vast majority of the war until they get the Mark V in Halo Combat Evolved, they're already in this moment getting switched to a prototype version of the armor. This prototype armor is enhanced with things that will help with reconnaissance and stealth. For example, all four Spartans have the ability now to go into a cloaked form, though they do say it takes up a lot of energy, so don't use it too much, use it sparingly. Kelly and John pretty much get drones that allow them to, deploy the drones and see what the drone sees in far off distances within their heads-up display. Fred and also Kelly get, wrist-mounted blades, which I think is really cool. Kind of reminds me of something Doom Guy would have, and I think that this is something we should bring to the future of Halo games. And Linda, of course, gets a early propulsion system, almost like a thruster and or jetpack, just so she has the ability to, change like wherever she needs to be at a quick moment, since she is more of a sniper and will have to have those moments where she needs to get out of, dangerous situations quick. So let's pause in the story and talk about this armor. On one end, I do really like that instead of what the Halo Fall of Reach movie did, where when they get the Mark IV armor, Everyone already has different helmets, such as Sam getting the CQB, Kelly having the EVA, Fred having the Halo 5 Centurion armor, and then Linda having the Argus helmet. That was just weird because we all know from the books that in Fall of Reach, all of the armor is the same. Every single Spartan wears Mark IV armor. Now, whether they have the serial number on their chest or not is totally up to you. I do think that if you're going to look at it from original perspective, they don't have those, but I personally like them once again. But I do think that when it comes to having them variant armors, this is a better way of doing it rather than just saying, oh, they just have brand new armor. It's, hey, here's why they have new armor. Here's why it differentiates between the different Spartans. It's experimental. We need them to test things out so that way we can, apply it better to future Mjolnir projects. Now, the armor doesn't have specifically a name. It's known as Project Cobalt, and the different variants, such as Chief's Mark 6, Fred Centurion, all have essentially Cobalt and then a little initial plus whatever serial number that Spartan is. So, for example, Master Chief, or John at this point, is wearing Cobalt CV.117, and Fred is wearing Cobalt MV.104, and so on and so forth for the other two members of Blue Team. But yes, once again, I think this is just a better way of introducing the different armor variants without breaking the lore or making anything crazy, especially since it's experimental armor, which means it won't have to be seen in future games, movies, etc. Okay, so back at the story. The Spartans have officially made their way to the planet and then are deployed on a Pelican, which is actually holding this cool land vehicle that the Spartans will be using on their mission. However, as they're making their way to the planet's surface, they are informed by Nora that another splinter of the Covenant forces have actually not gone towards the city as they expected. It's in fact going to the Black Reef mining colony, which is a mining colony that is settled by none other than the United Rebel Front, aka insurrectionists. Not understanding why they're going there, the Blue Team is then redeployed to that location to figure out why the Covenant is focusing on that one specific place, because it just seems like a weird place to go to. As soon as the Spartans make their landing within their little land vehicle, they are immediately met with hostile fire, but not by the Covenant, by none other than the rebels, the insurrectionists. John says, all right, let's test this armor out, goes into a cloaked form, makes his way off the land vehicle, and sneaks up on the rebel forces and basically apprehends what he suspects to be their commanding officer, a man by the name of Whittaker. John, holding Whittaker up, pretty much says, like, hey, like, I don't want to fight you. Do you know Colonel Watts? And they're like, yeah, of course we know Colonel Watts. He's like, yeah, my team was the one that captured them. So unless you want to fight, I'd honestly just settle down now. And they're all kind of like, all right. Well, what do you want? And so this is where John pretty much says, my name's John. We're here to fight the Covenant. The Covenant is, obviously this alien force. Do you know what happened to Harvest? They're like, we know some things. And he goes, well, here's what happened to Harvest. And unless you help me fight the Covenant off, they're going to do the exact same thing they did to Harvest to this planet. And with that, Whittaker's quick to go, you know what, John, you were absolutely right. We'll help you fight. Much to like the hesitation of much of his men, but all of them understanding like, well, what else are we going to do other than, help the Spartans and hopefully save our home? So the plan becomes for the rebels to essentially circle this lagoon that is around this mining colony. They will get to a side where they can start firing on the Covenant and cause the Covenant to kind of not retreat, but back up a little bit towards the Spartans and allowing them to flank them. This almost goes off without a hitch, but while John is using his drone to monitor some of the battle scenes, he sees an elite holding a weird object, an object that he believes is to be of like vast importance and wants to get closer. So he orders Blue Team to follow this elite. This elite makes its way to the entrance of the mines, along with a few other elites and Covenant forces, and they go down. John then orders his team to follow, while Whittaker and the rest of the rebels will stay on the surface and fight off the Covenant and prevent any of them from getting down in the mines, basically ambushing the Spartans. While the rebels are fighting the Covenant on the surface, many of them asking Whittaker, like, why are we helping them? Like, this is the UNSC. Wouldn't it be just smart to blow the mines right now, trapping both the Spartans and the Covenant down there, killing two birds with one stone? Because, within war, there is collateral damage, and so be it. But Whittaker is probably the most logical insurrectionist, unfortunately, and I'll get to why I say that. For most insurrectionists throughout these books, a lot of them don't care to trust the UNSC. Irregardless of what the Covenant can do, they're like, we're not trusting them. They're our worst enemy. The Covenant's just another big bad, but the UNSC is just the same level of bad. But Whittaker understands that this is a new war. The UNSC fights for the rebels, and the rebels fights for the UNSC. In the mines, Blue Team comes across the Covenant, and utilizing their cloaks, they try to sneak up on them. Unfortunately, elites are pretty much equipped with understanding how, cloaking technology works, of course. And the humans version is very primitive to the point where when they try to sneak up on this group of elites, they all kind of go, yeah, they're right there and they're cloaked, fire on them. So of course, Blue Team deactivates their cloaking devices and begins to engage with the Covenant. Now, they're doing relatively well up until on the surface, the rebels are slowly but surely getting overrun. So to prevent the Covenant from getting down in those mines and ambushing their new Spartan friends, they decide to blow the entrance. Not to trap the Spartans, but purely to prevent the Covenant from getting down there. Unfortunately, this explosion causes a rupture throughout the mines, which is like a maze of tunnels, causing areas to rupture with water from the lake surround, or I don't know if it's an ocean or a lake, but part of this water around this little settlement comes through the surface or through the tunnels of this mine and begin to flood. The Spartans begin to fight both the Covenant and the incoming waters, and for the most part, most of the Blue Team is able to escape at least those tunnels relatively fine. Linda, however, is separated by her team. As this is happening in orbit, Commander Yao sees ships coming in. There's a lot more Covenant reinforcements coming in than they had originally expected. So, utilizing, big brain power, Commander Yao decides that now is the time to issue a general order of retreat to all military personnel. Nora then goes, okay, what about non-military personnel? And Commander Yao's like, we'll see how much room we have and we'll go from there. Have you gotten in contact with Blue Team? And since they're in the mines, she hasn't been able to. So Commander Yao's like, okay, well, they're on a time crunch, so let's make sure that we stay on top of them. Back in the mines, however, Linda is able to make it out of the water and into this like chamber-esque area. Unfortunately for her, this chamber is full of at least 100 different Covenant. And so she begins to fight basically tooth and nail, trying to survive, trying to prevent the Covenant from continuing their mission. All the while, she's contacting for help from her fellow Spartans. Blue Team, John, Kelly, and Fred are, for the most part, trying to find Linda as well. And every now and then they'll get a transmission from her, but it's very scratchy at best. So utilizing both their drones and armor, they are starting to use it to locate her location. They are able to find it and then begin to make their way towards her. But as they're doing this, Fred finds something on the ground, and it happens to be this weird Covenant device that they saw the elite from earlier carrying. Fred's like, we should bring this back to Halsey, puts it on the back of his armor, as they make their way to this wall where they place a charge, because this wall is, on the other side of where Linda is. So blowing this, they are able to go in and start helping clean up the rest of the Covenant that Linda has been fighting these past few minutes. Now, during this fight, unfortunately, and kind of funny enough, I had to go back and reread that I read that part right. Fred is shot in the back of the armor, both compromising his armor and destroying the object that he had just recovered to bring back to Halsey. So this whole thing that led them down this mine is destroyed. And with that, they begin to finish off fighting the Covenant. And then they all look around like, okay, so what now? They're like, well, basically we failed at trying to get our objective. Let's get the heck out of here. How do we do that? Because for the most part, they are trapped down in these mines. And the other issue now is Fred's armor has been compromised. Not a major puncture wound like Sam had, but enough to where they're gonna have to figure out what to do. Fortunately, as this whole mining system is starting to crumble from those early explosions, a hole comes bursting through of water and starts to fill up this room that blue team is in. John pretty much says, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll let the room fill with water, then we'll escape through that same hole that just broke through. Fred's like, what about me? My armor's compromised. And John's like, how bad is it? And Fred's like, I mean, I can fight, but it's not water's protective, it's not sealed. And Kelly's like, well, I mean, it's sealed enough that you should be just fine, buddy. And so John's like, you're gonna have to just try it. I'll have Linda and Kelly be right behind you in case you need help. So, moments later, the water fills the room. They escape through this hole, and then we get this cool little frame of the four Spartans kind of trudging their way up this, like, hill, I guess, so to speak, leading back up to the surface of where the rest of the United Rebels are fighting. Making their way to the surface, Fred is able to pretty much remove his helmet, allowing all the water that just came rushing into his armor to essentially just make its way out. And what they come across is the entire area that they had left earlier at the surface is completely under attack by the Covenant. John, realizing this is about the time to get out, calls for extraction, but the Pelican Chief is like, yo, there is a lot going on down there. You're going to need to clear an LZ for me. Of course, that's always the mission.
The missions change. They always do.
So, Blue Team and some of the United Rebels begin to fight tooth and nail, trying to clear a path for this Pelican to land. Fortunately enough for them, Whittaker and a few of his rebels pretty much hijacked the Spartans' land vehicle and then come bursting in, utilizing all its weapons and everything to take out as much as the Covenant as possible, clearing the landing zone. As the Pelican comes down, the troop bay door opens and the Spartans make their way aboard. And just as the rebels who had just helped the Spartans are making their way aboard as well, the crew chief stops them and says, sorry, military personnel only. And of course, Whittaker and the rebels are like, what the hell, we've been helping them. Without us, they wouldn't be right here. And there would be no cleared landing zone. And the crew chief's like, those are just my orders, my guy. However, I can tell you that if you can find another way off planet, no one's going to shoot you down from the UNSC. All right, you guys take it easy. And then he leaves. He gets on board, he closes the troop bay door, and the Pelican leaves. We then switch to a frame where John's yelling at this crew chief, going, why the hell did you leave him down there? And the crew chief again is like, and my orders. Back on board the UNSC Persian Gate, John makes it known to Commander Yao that he disapproves of her leaving behind the rebels. And she pretty much says, dude, I don't care, okay? This war is bigger than any one person, group, planet, whatever. And you're going to figure that out real soon. And then dismisses the Spartans. And this is kind of a funny frame because it shows all four Spartans with their helmets off looking just pissed. But also this like weird, I know it's supposed to make them look annoyed, but it just makes it look like they stink. And so after Commander Yao leaves the room, Halsey does her best to try and console Chief, but not really, because she pretty much just says, hey John, you got your team out, that's what matters. There's always going to be collateral damage in war, but hey, can you tell me what happened or what the Covenant was doing on the surface? And as she's asking this, we then cut back to the final frame of basically the rebels back on the surface of Alpha Corby 2, pretty much getting overrun by Covenant as the UNSC forces begin to leave the planet, abandoning them. So yes, that is Collateral Damage pretty much in a nutshell. It's very weird to kind of do these videos on a comic book because it was very quick. Like, as I was looking through my notes, I'd scroll and go, oh, I'm almost done already. And it's just kind of a weird way to talk about a comic book because at the very least I can visualize almost everything that happens. And here's what I will say. I don't like how short comic books are because you don't get enough time exploring those different emotions and characters. For example, Commander Yao kind of just went from annoying to more annoying in the span of however long this is. I think it's like 40, 50 pages. And within a comic book series, that's really quick to like read through. I feel like with Whittaker, him going from we gotta fight the UNSC to we gotta help the UNSC was just such a quick switch that it's like, obviously in a comic book we don't have the same amount of time to really adapt characters and have them change their feelings and perspectives, so we pretty much just have to have it flip on sight. And it's a little weird. It makes sense why they did it, but at the same time it makes me wish we had a little bit more development on that. part. One other thing that I will say on this is, like I said with the illustrations, when it comes to the armor and the Covenant, it looks good. Of course, there's a lot of areas that look wonky, but for the most part, the Covenant's all in like Reach-esque design. The Spartans look fantastic. There's certain panels that make the helmets look weird, but then there's certain panels that make it look cool. It just really depends on what's going on. But when it comes to people, they all look weird. For example, that last segment with Blue Team, and I'll try to get a picture of it up right here. These are supposed to be 14-year-old kids still. And now I know with augmentations, it's going to really enhance the way they look and how their age works. But at the same time, these don't look like 14-year-olds at all. These look like 50-year-olds. So for me, it's like they should still look young. I don't think the Spartans are going to vastly age that much because there's obviously times in both Silent Storm and Oblivion when the helmets come off, a lot of people are like, how old are you? Whereas in this, if they took it off their helmets, I'd be like, yeah, that dude's at least 40 years old. But they're not. They're still 14-year-old kids. And this takes place before Silent Storm and Oblivion, where a lot of the times, you know, when their faces are shown, people are like, you are nowhere near 18, are you? And the last thing I will say on this, I get what the story was trying to do with the collateral damage and talk about how, you know, war is hell, the UNSC's not perfect, the rebels are not perfect. So bad things are always going to happen. But what I did not like is it felt like it set up a mission for, or not really a mission, but like it set up the Covenant to be on this planet for a reason. And then we have this weird object that Blue Team's trying to retrieve. And then nothing comes out of it. Even at the very end, when Halsey asked John what were they doing on the planet, I don't even honestly know what they were doing on the planet. It's never really explained. I even looked up on Halopedia, and I don't think I saw anything when I was researching about why they were on the planet. Just the fact that they didn't glass it, which must mean something Forerunners on the planet. So unless something's changed, and I could check the encyclopedia and check Halopedia again, I don't think this story was fully fleshed out enough to where I could say definitely read this. I think it's fun, it's good, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm still more of the normal novel guys. Graphic novels are cool, and depending on who the authors are, it can be really good. And on their ends, it can be very rushed and forced, where it's like, this was not necessary. I think realistically, it was just to give us a better perspective of this era of John's story within Silent Storm and Oblivion, especially since it has a Master Chief story at the top of it, like those two books do. So I think it was more of just another story to add to that. It is great that in Halo Oblivion, spoiler alert if you've not watched that video or read it, so if you don't want to see it, skip this part. I'll put a timestamp here. But in Halo Oblivion, this part where Commander Yao abandons the United Rebels is mentioned in Oblivion because it almost happens again with the cast-offs or the castaways, whatever you want to call them, in Oblivion. When John is like, we need to get off this planet, and the commander of the Night's Watch is like, yeah, let's do that, but do we need to bring the castaways? And John's like, you gotta be seriously kidding me. I liked that. That's actually what propelled me to go read Collateral Damage again, just to see it again. I knew what happened in Collateral Damage, but upon rereading it, I'm just kind of like, it was fun. It was cool. I liked the armor, but that's about it. One final thing I'll say about this is at the very end of this book, and I'll show pictures, but like just to give you a perspective, the artist does talk about his method to creating the different armors for this Blue Team. There's one frame that I'm going to try and get enlarged on the screen here of Fred and his original version. This is such a cool design for Fred that I swear to God, it's Doom Guy and Fred mixed in one, and that is a weird, potent mix that I need. Halo Studios, listen to me. I need it. Make me Doom Guy, Master Chief, Fred armor, okay? Just do it, okay? Xbox owns both of them. We're going to be fine. But overall, yes. I will say Collateral Damage it's a fun read. It's not a great read. It's nothing special. It's not something that I would say you need to read on your journey. It just adds to it. If you want to continue to build your full-on timeline of Halo events, read it. If you're going into this thinking, I need to read this for Silent Storm, no. This is not necessary reading for Silent Storm. The armor gets explained somewhat decently in Silent Storm, but it's not necessary for you to read the book. Most of the stuff that's actually even talked about in this, such as the drones, the propulsion system, the mounted blades are so not discussed in Sunstorm Oblivion that like they're there, but they're an afterthought. They're like, yeah, they exist, but moving forward. So you don't need to read Sunstorm. It's not integral to the story. Yes, Oblivion mentions events, but the event is pretty much well explained enough in Oblivion that like you can grasp the concept of Commander Yao doing something that John now disagrees with Commander Petrov in Halo Oblivion. So with that, what do you need to read, watch, and or play in order to prepare for Collateral Damage? Realistically, you only need to read Fall of Reach Part 1 and 2 because that will set up the story of John up until the death of Sam 034 and then jumps directly into this. But again, you could almost honestly read this without it because you pretty much just get shown and explained what happens to Sam in the comic book. Again, it's not something you need to prepare at all. So yeah, I think this is the first time I really kind of left a review kind of going meh about. So overall, it's a fun comic book. Give it a read if you can. If not, you're not missing anything crazy. But that is pretty much it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think of Collateral Damage. Let me know which comic book or graphic novel you're excited for me to get to. There's a lot out there, and there's some that I absolutely love, and then there's some that I'm just kind of content with. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.